Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brander Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a guest today that he's got a long and storied law enforcement career, and then he decided to write a book based on basically a situation that I thought would be really interesting for everyone to be able to hear about, to learn about. And I also just want to get into his career because this guy's been in the law enforcement profession for a long time, and I knew you needed to meet him. Deputy Chief Rusty Myers, welcome to the show.
Hello, Betsy. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'm gonna break protocol here, and how come they call you Rusty? Where'd that come from?
My real name is Arthur Wilson Myers III, and I wrote the book under that name because my father deserves it. I'm still blessed to have both my parents. When I was born, I was a fiery redhead, and it's faded over time, obviously. But my mother was extremely concerned that people would call me Red. So she came up with the nickname Rusty, to which my uncle who raised dogs promptly said, Rusty, that's a dog's name. So that's what I go by as Rusty. That's what my friends call me. That's what I prefer you to call me. But that's where Rusty came from.
I love it. That's a great story. I think your mom did the right thing. I think that's fantastic. So now we know why you're named Rusty. Chief, why'd you become a cop?
So I went to the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. I graduated in 1993. I was in the class of 92. It was so great. I stuck around for an extra year. The 5-year plan was me. When I graduated, I really had two career tracks I looked at seriously. One was to go into teaching because I am a history nerd and I love history. I love studying it. And the other was law enforcement. And I took a long look at both, and I kind of saw what teachers were going through with some of the students. And I just decided that if I was going to deal with that, I'd rather be armed. So I
In
made a choice to go into law enforcement and never look back.
the
Love it.
90s, when you got on the job, that was an interesting time to be a cop. We were seeing a crime surge similar to what we saw post 2020.
Mhm.
And so it had to be a really exciting time.
We were busy. I started in what they called Team One in the city of Charleston, which is the downtown area, which was a very big challenge to try to police. After a couple of years there, I transferred to Team Three, where I spent 13 years of my 23 years in the city of Charleston. I spent in Team Three, and I was in patrol. I was a patrolman almost my entire career until I sat behind a desk, which is unusual. We only had two lieutenants that actually got promoted out of patrol, but I worked in Team Three for a while, got promoted to corporal, went to a Team Four in West Ashley of South Carolina, if you know where I'm talking about, and spent some time there, and then made sergeant. Went back to James Island as a sergeant. I was a sergeant for about 3 or 4 years, and then I actually took over an interdiction team, which is something I'd never really done before. I did patrol, and then interdiction was kind of the tip of the spear. Go find trouble and arrest it. So I was lucky enough when I went to that squad that I had some very sharp young officers who knew the job. They knew the lines that you couldn't cross and they walked the lines, but that's the job. And they taught me a lot. They taught me everything I know about interdiction, and it was a lot of fun. We had a good time. I had that squad for 3 years. We had no complaints, which is kind of unheard of for an interdiction squad, but we did the job right. So that was a lot of fun. And then I made lieutenant, and in the first year of that, I spent command duty lieutenant, which is basically the chief at night. So there's not a problem until I got to make a phone call. And you're expected to pretty much run stuff like the chief. And I did that on midnight shift for a year. I don't remember much of that year because I don't sleep right on midnight shift, but I got through it. And then I got promoted, or not promoted. I got moved back to James Island as the commander, which was a unique opportunity because I knew every officer in that team except one. And I met him the first night I was a lieutenant, which gave me the ability to come in and already know who my hard chargers were, who my possible problem kids were, who would answer a call, and who would sit behind a grocery store and do nothing. So they couldn't, they couldn't sling bull. I knew who they were. I knew what they did. I can address issues as they came up. But they also knew me. But they also knew that, I believed in doing things right, do the job right, go home well, do this job like your mom's in the passenger seat. You probably never get in trouble. She'll probably slap you for the language. But other than that, you'll probably never get in trouble. And that's kind of what I preached. After about 3 years as a team commander, the chief at the time was Greg Mullen. Greg decided to do a wish list for every lieutenant. Where would you wish to go? And so I was, well, I've been in patrol my whole life. I'll put training on my wish list, and it'll never happen. That'll never happen. Well, I was wrong. And the chief called me in and said, I'm going to put you in training. And I kind of stopped and I said, well, can I ask why? And he said, I think we've lost our patrol mindset in training and we need to get back to it. And I said, well, that's good because that's the only mindset I really know is patrol. So I will do it. So went to patrol. My team got broke up and the chief even apologized for it. We had like 8 sergeants in the team. 6 of them got transferred or promoted and moved to other areas. And he apologized and he said, I hate to do that to the team. It's such a good, well-oiled machine right now, but team 3 is where we're building our leaders. And that was actually what the officers put on my plaque when I left the team. Because to me, coming from him, that was probably one of the greatest, one of the greatest compliments I've ever received in my life. So went to training, took over there. This was back, active shooter was really starting to pick up. That training, we started with SWAT stuff and moved our way through diamonds and T's and Y's. And now we're down to just go get them,
Mhm.
And so I got to do a lot of active shooter training with all the officers. Chief Mullen was really big on community policing, which is a catchword that gets on my nerves sometimes, but he was really big on the ethical side of policing. So we taught a lot of ethics. We put together a civil rights in Charleston program because one of the problems we were having is we were hiring officers from Ohio to come to Charleston, South Carolina. And they didn't know the history of Charleston and the civil rights movement. And Charleston was huge in the civil rights movement. And they didn't understand that you might not want to pull a traffic stop right here because something happened here significant that they still remember. It's still part of the community's memory. So we started taking them around. When Mother Emanuel happened, we added that to the tour. We took all the new recruits to Mother Emanuel to let them meet the church ladies there. Then we had the Charleston 9 firefighters, so we started taking them by the old Sofa Superstore site where they've got a memorial and all built up, and let them see. There's a cost when we fail or when something goes bad, like the Sofa Superstore. There's a cost, and it's not a pretty one. It's bad. So Chief Mullen got about 11 years as chief. He retired, and we spent a year searching for a new chief. And then we brought in another chief from outside was brought in, and one of the things he did was he wanted to do a big shakeup. At his old department, SWAT had run the training division. I wasn't SWAT. In fact, I think of all my training officers, only one of them was on the SWAT team. So basically, we all got replaced with SWAT folks over a couple of months. I ended up back downtown in Team 2, which is the more expensive, ritzy area of the peninsula, and worked there for 2 or 3 months before I had my incident, which, blew up my life.
So let's talk about that. Bring us to that situation.
So I was team commander. I was sitting in my office. We had a suspicious party call, and they got into a foot pursuit. A rookie outran his FTO. I'll just leave that there. And got the guy behind a house, but because he was still in training, he didn't know exactly where he was, couldn't put it out, got in a fight. During the fight, he fell on a garden rake, one of those spiky rakes, and it stuck in his arm, in his hand. So the guy got away because when he jumped up to run, the rake was still connected to his arm.
Ah.
I got on scene, and my first concern now is I got an officer bleeding. That's always my first concern. So I go straight to him. He's sitting in the EMS wagon. They're treating him, and they're like, it's going to be some stitches. We're going to transport. Just take him to the hospital, have him checked out, make sure they clean these wounds real good. Okay, the guy's gone at this point. I figure that's the end of it. Citizen walks up and says, hey, I think he's in that house. Okay, so we go to the door. The door's locked. And as luck and God's sense of humor would have it, the homeowner showed up at that very moment and said, well, I just walked through the store. I didn't lock my house. So she rips out a key and is immediately concerned about her pets. So instead of listening to us and letting us clear the house, she runs in. My officer's running behind her. The bad guy was hiding in a closet. So he runs out of the house. We get into a second foot pursuit with the officers. Me and my sergeant come around the corner and just see our officers racing after the guy. So we get in a foot pursuit, and I'm picking up body cams as we go because they're falling off in the foot pursuit. We end up running down Rainbow Row. He jumps behind a house, and me and the sergeant don't initially see that. We haven't cleared the corner yet. The officers chase him. He slips in some pea gravel, little tiny quarter-inch rocks that had just been laid for the driveway. Slips and falls. Me and Sarge lose sight of everything for 10 or 12 seconds, and then we realize, okay, there's screams coming from over there. Let's roll over there. We get there. There's 3 officers on him. He's on the ground. They're trying to get him under control and get him in handcuffs. Sarge jumps on the pile. I'm like, there's 4 guys. He's not going anywhere. We're behind a house in a fenced yard. This guy could say anything. You know, we've had a number of incidents in Charleston itself, in addition to nationally, because this was where we had the the Schlager shooting and everything else. So my thought is, former training commander, I'm going to video this. I'm just going to stand back and watch
Mm-hmm.
because they don't need me to jump in. This is
And
they're
you're
grappling
wearing a
with
body
me,
camera.
and I'm wearing a body cam. Yeah. So the 4 of them are trying to get him in cuffs. As they're doing that, one of the officers stands up. As he's standing up, I'm turning to my radio because now I got another officer screaming she's hurt. And I don't even know what's going on with that one yet. So I'm trying to turn my head to the radio on my shoulder, and I see him slap the guy on the back of the head. And I later characterized it as a cuff. Gib slap, if you watch NCIS. What my grandma used to do when I talked too loudly in church. And I thought, okay, in my head, okay, I got to ask about that. I don't know why he did that. But then he stood there and he's kind of just moving his legs around, kind of making a little pile of rocks. And I see him doing that, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm just going to give him his body cam back, let him kind of settle down because we've got 3 or 4, maybe, I don't know, a lot of adrenaline dumps at this point. 2
Mm-hmm.
foot pursuits and injured officer and running code. There's a lot of adrenaline going through his system. So I walk over, I hand him that. The guy starts complaining about I'm hot on the rocks. It's 98 degrees because nothing ever happens when the weather's nice in Charleston. So we're all sweating, and he's on those rocks. They're burning him. So we get him up. I tell him get him up off the rocks. He's got a few scratches. We take him back. The EMS team looks at him real quick. No big deal. We leave the scene, and I'm going to go by the office so I can download my body cam real quick. I need to ask about that slap, but my biggest concern at the moment is I got one officer hurt I hadn't seen yet, and one that's bleeding and got transported to the hospital. So I got to go find out what's going on with my officers. That was, I thought, the end of it. That day the officers went in. They did their use of force reports. As I was riding to the hospital, I was getting ready to call the officer, and my phone rang, and it was him. And I asked him, I said, "Say, what was that about? What'd you slap him on the head for?" And he immediately says, "Oh, he was spitting. I thought he was going to spit on me." And I said, "Okay, well, spitting on an officer in the performance of duty is a felony in South Carolina. If you stop that with a tap to the head, then no problem."
Mm-hmm.
So they did their use of forces. I came in the next day, did the review. I could not find the video. I watched it download on my little MDT, which is, an 11-inch screen. And I could clearly see that he slapped him on the back of the head. I said, okay, well, I even told him, I said, I might want to look at that, but don't sweat it. I don't think it's any big deal. If he was spitting, then, it's all justified. And I tried to watch the video a couple of times, but I couldn't get it. And it turned out months, years maybe later, we figured out it was because I was using the body cam that I had just been assigned. It's still assigned to another officer, and then I downloaded it on my detective's MDT, so it was all screwed up in
Mm-hmm.
download land, which is, I guess, why I couldn't find it to review it some more. And still thought that was pretty much the end of it until Friday. Friday about noon, the sergeant walks in, and it's the same squad, and he goes, "Hey, they pulled him off the street." And I was like, "What? For what?" And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I got another officer with a DUI or something. And he didn't even tell us, didn't really occur to me that it was dealing with that. So I call over to IA, and they won't tell me anything. I get it. I know the job. And we can't talk. It's under investigation. And I was like, well, it's about that foot pursuit. And I'm like, the foot pursuit? Well, I was there. It's on my body cam. I got the whole thing on body cam. You can watch it. I'll come in. You want me to give a statement or something? Nah, don't worry about it. So the weekend comes, and Monday again, I'm at dive trading of all things, and I keep hearing stuff about the foot pursuit, you know, the secret investigation that is everybody seems to know more about than me. So I stopped by the station again. I bump into the IA lieutenant. He was a good friend of mine, and I said, "Hey, do you want me to do an interview? Because you know I saw the whole thing." He's like, "No, we're not going to interview you. The whole thing is, you know, we probably don't need to interview. We don't want to." Okay, fine. And about 2 hours later, he calls me at home and says, "Hey, we do want to do an interview. Can you come in at 7:30?" Sure, no problem. So 7:30 the next morning, I go in. I give an interview. They asked me because on my video, all you can see of his legs is his knees, and his knees are kind of moving back and forth. And they asked me
Of the
about
bad
that.
guy,
No, this is the officer that
the
stood up.
officer's knees. Okay.
Yeah, and they asked me what he was doing, and I said, "Well, he was just piddling in the rocks, just kind of making a little stack of rocks with his feet. I just nervous energy." And that was the only question I ever got asked about that. And they asked about the slap, and I explained. I said, "Yeah, I asked about that. It's in my report." You know, he said that the guy was spitting, and he said it like that. It wasn't something that he had time to make up. It was just immediately what came out of his mouth, and I found it to be credible. So that's what I used as justification for it. So finished my interview, went back to my office, and thought, okay, well, that's over. I guess I'm probably going to get a letter about something, but I don't know. I mean, when they first called me, the only thing I could think of in the whole incident was that 10 or 12 seconds when we were behind the corner and they had already rounded the corner. Had something happened in that 10 or 12 seconds that wasn't reflected properly in the use of forces. That's all I could figure was the problem at that point. And then they call me about 2 hours later and say, "Hey, we need you to come bring your car. We're putting you on administrative leave." And I was like, For what?" And so I called my wife. She came with my father, picked me up. My wife couldn't drive because she was freaking out. And
And that's what, people who aren't in the profession, um, when you're put on administrative leave, you're basically not a cop anymore. I mean,
no,
you're turning your car and your badge and your gun, and you're generally speaking, you're getting paid, but
yeah, I
it's
was
a
on leave with pay.
right, but it's a big deal. And this was what year?
2019.
Right. So
So
this is a big deal.
a lot of stuff
So
is going on. George Floyd's about to happen.
right.
We have a lot of stuff, and it was just very unusual. I couldn't figure out what the complaint was. I didn't know what they were accusing me of. The paper I signed just said it was that the case was under investigation. They didn't have to give me the exact charges or anything because I had no idea.
Right.
So I went home that night. I emailed an attorney that's kind of the go-to guy down here, Andy Savage. He was the big time. He's pretty much retired at this point, but I stay in touch with him. And I just sent him an email about 7 o'clock, and I said, "Hey, I think I need to talk to you. I don't understand what's going on, but no one will tell me anything. I'm on admin leave." And I was shocked when about an hour and a half later, about 9 o'clock, he emailed me back. And it was obviously straight from him. And his immediate concern was my mental state. You know, don't let this get to you. I know how these things go. I'll see you in the office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I said, okay, well, I'll be there.
People think law enforcement stress comes from, oh, you're seeing dead bodies, and oh, you're getting involved in a shooting and this and that. What you're describing, I'm literally feeling my blood pressure rise as you explain this. And I mean, and I know the end of the story. This stuff is wildly stressful, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. My brain was I started drinking for the first time in my life because I hate alcohol. And even today, it's just not something I've ever done. But I called it the loop. Every day I would sit in my yard, I would work on it because I could actually do something with my energy. But once that energy ran out and I got tired and had to come in, it was the loop. It would start in my head. What did I do? Why am I here? What's going on? I don't understand. And it was just, I called it the loop. And the only way I could find to quiet that loop was to self medicate. So I would
Mm-hmm.
go in, I knew exactly the measurement. 3 shots was enough to quiet the loop for a couple hours. 4 shots made me feel sick.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I would do. And don't do that. All right.
It's a
Don't do
terrible
that.
idea, but a
All
lot of
right.
people do it. Right. So the investigation's going on. There's some media on this stuff, and so how does this conclude?
So in the end, I was terminated, found guilty of 3 charges that they had to explain to me because I didn't know what I'd been charged with, and I immediately said that didn't happen. What you're saying absolutely did not happen. They accused the officer of kicking rocks on the guy, but right to work state, we don't have unions, so they misconducted me to our academy, and misconduct means this officer should never be an officer again.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to fight that through our police academy. The first hearing you go to is it's a lawyer who works for the academy sitting as a judge who's supposed to make a recommendation one way or another. It's preponderance of evidence. So 50% and a feather is all he needs to say, yes, this happened, or I'm not sure this happened. I don't think it happened. He came back with an inconclusive, which is really great when you're expecting some type of resolution one way or another.
Right.
And then I ended up in front of our law enforcement training council, which is 9 people, the chief of SLED, the South Carolina Attorney General, and 7 police chiefs. And the whole way up there, my attorney's prepping me to lose. He's like, Chiefs don't go against chiefs. Best case, maybe they'll give you a suspension because they have several things they can do to your certification. And the officer involved had received a 1 year certification and a certification revocation for 1 year suspension. And then, so he's just setting me up just to lose. So we present the case, and the first person to speak is the attorney general. And the attorney general just goes, this is not misconduct. Why are we here? And I kind of sat up because your attorney says don't let it show on your face, and I don't have a
Right.
hider face. That's why I became a cop too, because I'm a terrible liar, so I have to tell the truth. Um, and I kind of sat up like, wait a minute, now that sounded good. And then in the end, they voted that there was no misconduct. I got what's called a full no misconduct, which at the time was extremely rare because it's very easy to say, well, you've already been out of work. At that point, I've been out almost 2 years. You've been out 2 years, 2 year suspension, have a sensitivity class, go back to work.
Right. By the time this starts to conclude, when you go before this board, this council, it's 2021. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And so the atmosphere for a law enforcement, especially in this type of situation, I mean, it's extraordinary. And okay, so you're before the board, and holy cow, things are going your way, which is extraordinary.
After you lose, you lose, you lose, you lose, you lose, you lose, and all of a sudden you win. You don't even know what to do. You're just like, oh my God, somebody finally looked at the evidence and said it's not there. What are you talking about? Which I'd been saying for 2 years.
Right.
So what it did though, still a training commander, right? 2.5 years almost of my life was spent defending who I was and what had happened. And I don't ever want to see another cop have to go through that. And I know they do. So when I wrote the book is not written from it explains the story, but I was very, very intentional not showing anger or grievance or anything. There's parts where I talk about it, but it's relevant to my mental state at the time. But when you get sent home on admin leave, brother, sister, you're not alone. Other cops know. And when I first started writing the book, I called it When the Blue Line Fails. But what I realized when I was writing it is the men and women that got me through were either family or members of the line. So I changed it to Frays because I said, the blue line, my department failed, my leadership failed. But when it came down to it, members of the blue line that were my friends who knew me personally, they were the ones, retired cops, retired military guys that knew me are the ones that got me through it because I was to the point of suicide. I had a plan. Behind me, you'll see hats. Part of my plan was to surround myself with all the hats I wore in life. That's how detailed my plan was. And when my wife yelled at me in the yard one day, I realized, I had a plan. All those sleepy, you sit through mental wellness training, and I
Mm-hmm.
did what everybody does. I played on my phone.
Yeah.
But the one thing I remembered from all of them was the checklist they give you. These are the warning signs. These are the things to watch out for. And as I sat in the yard that day, I started checking boxes. And I checked every single box except illegal drug use. But I was using the alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the last one's always they have a plan or they know a plan. They've talked about a plan. And I had an extensive plan. in how I plan to leave the world. So, from a training perspective, I want cops to know we kill ourselves 5 or 6 times more than the bad guys.
Mhm.
That's a shameful number. We as a profession need to take accountability for that and understand that part of the reason officers do this is the way they're led. Part of it is because they've come to expect institutional betrayal. And we have studies that tell us that institutional betrayal for a police officer is far worse than responding to a critical incident.
Absolutely. That's one of the
Far
reasons I
worse.
wanted to talk to you was that organizational betrayal that you talk about. And I don't think because none of us expect uh that you put their patch on, right? You put their badge on and you go out there and you're willing to die for the strangers in this community, and you expect that the organization, the institution, to be with you. You're part of
Right.
them. And when you feel that betrayal that you did, you know, the, again, that's why I think your book is so important. That's why I think telling your story is so important, because there is cop after cop after cop that has been betrayed by their organization, by the justice system.
Mhm.
As well as I do, we have cops sitting in prison now for doing their job. That's one of the things that the National Police Association gets involved in,
Yep.
is trying to support these officers and reverse these situations. You tell your story so well. And you talk about that organizational betrayal, but you also talk about leadership. You talk
Yeah.
about what to do and what not to do as a leader. And one of the things that we see, and I'm sure you see it too when you're doing training, is especially the young cops now. What are they asking? Is the department going to be with me? Are they going to back me up? Are they going to support me?
Do they have
And
my
that's a
back?
huge deal, right?
It absolutely is. And, I wrote the book with the idea that if you were going through this book can give you some hope. And I hope you never go through it. You may not. There are police officers who retire every day that were lucky and never had to go through something like this. But I am not a shiny example of survival, but I am an example of survival. People I cared about stood up for me. My wife, God love her, 31 years we've been married, and she made me get counseling. I went. It helped with not just the incident. This was the straw that broke the camel's back because I have PTSD. PTSI is what I call it in the book. And when I went to counseling after a couple of sessions, the counselor was like, "All right, I know about your incident. Now tell me what you dream about." And so I started recounting a young officer that had been killed in line of duty that I had trained, that was a good friend. The superstore, I talked about that earlier, and the Sofa Superstore fire, the Mother Manuel shooting, and most police officers, I think the number is like 67%. I think that's probably grossly unrelated. If you're in the career for 10 years or more, you've got stuff packed in your PTS closet. It's packed in there, and it starts to push on the door, right? And one day the door gets open. For me, it was this investigation, and it just all came out. It all came out. It exploded out. And when I first started going to counseling, I dreamed about Joe getting killed about once a week. And I am to the point now where I honestly do not remember the last time I dreamed about it. It's been so long. Now, they can come back. And part of PTS that we have to understand is what to do when you feel it coming back, and being able to work through those emotions and those feelings, because it's an injury. It's not a disorder. It's an injury and it doesn't bleed. It's not something that, we were taught, particularly in our generation, suck it up.
Right. Don't
Don't
talk
worry
about
about
it.
it. That double homicide suicide with a 2-year-old baby. Yeah, you don't need to talk to anybody about that. You're
Yeah.
fine. And that's kind of where I wrote the book from, because I didn't want it to come across as angry. I that's water under the bridge. I ended up in a great place at Somerville PD under Chief Wright, who made me his internal affairs inspector, with the charge that I was not to allow him to do to any officer what was done to me, which was good
Which I
because that's what I was
love.
going to do.
Right, right.
And that's where I was expected to retire from. But one of the things I'll tell you guys or gals, if you're in trouble and something happens and your life explodes and you get fired, there are still people out there who know you. They know the real you, not the one the world wants them to believe. And one day, literally out of the blue, the phone rang. My current chief was like, my deputy chief's going to retire. I don't know where you're going, but you should think about this. If you want to put in, you should put in. And I wasn't even ready for that. Thought it was just a hey, how you doing phone call,
Mm-hmm.
And then after being told by my wife, my father, and my chief that I was an imbecile, and the chief actually goes, "You're an idiot. You need to use my phone." I called him back. I put in, had to go through the whole process, of course, and was ultimately selected to be the deputy chief. And what the whole thing taught me is to pay attention to your officers, and I'm not perfect, right? I got quiet guys that just don't want to talk. So I keep an eye on them, but the worst thing you can do is walk in my office and I say, "How you doing, man?" If you go, "I'm fine," then that's the beginning of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine. It's cuss words in law enforcement. If they tell you they're fine, that's the start of the conversation. That's not the end of it. What do you mean you're fine? What are you fine with? You got to dig because we're cops. We don't trust easy and we don't tell our stories easy. We don't tell people what we've been through. And I mean, obviously, I wrote a book. I did because I feel like everything that prepared me for that situation can be used to make our profession better and to help us take care of our people better.
Absolutely. And and the way that you put that is so extraordinary. That's why I wanted to get you on, because your story is such an important one. I think the book's a very important book. Where can people find you and the book, and how can they bring you in to talk and
Okay.
stay in touch with you?
The book is called Tattered When the Blue Line Frays, and it's available on Amazon. The email for that is tatteredreaders@gmail.com. I have a Facebook page, Tattered FB is the Facebook page. And I have a very fledgling little podcast that's going to have like little 3-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute pep talks on it when I get done with it. And that is at Tattered Podcast. But let me say this too, real quick. If you're an officer and you're going through this, I realize that $7.99 or $16.99 or $23 or $24.99 is a lot of money when you're eating Pop-Tarts for breakfast and hot dogs for lunch. Get in touch with me. I will send you a PDF of the book. This book is not about me making money. If you need to read it, I will get it in your hands. I don't care about making money off this. What I care about is saving a life. And if it could save one, and I've already had people tell me it spoke to me, every word you said is exactly what I'm going through. So I know it's affecting people. But if it can save you, if you're going through it, get in touch with me, tatteredreaders@gmail.com, and I'll send you a PDF of it tonight. I mean, it's that important to me.
That is a perfect way to end the show. I think, Chief, we're going to see a lot more of you. Get on that YouTube page and start putting stuff out, because what you have to say is so incredibly important. And I can't thank you enough for being with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.